Hey everybody, welcome back to Budget Worship. Just wanted to take a little bit of time and go over with my friends here about some things that we had talked about, mainly being the Christmas programs. Now, being this time of year, we're just coming out of Christmas. We've all, worship leaders, this is when they probably work the hardest is during the Christmas programs. And it's not just Christmas. I do want to clarify that. We're also talking about anything else where we have other, main programs that are really involved and really polished. And that happens a couple of times a year. Usually, the churches will do one for the Easter, 4th of July. A lot of churches will do something like that, and then Christmas, of course, being the biggest. So we just want to really talk about, take a little bit of time to just go over and not necessarily an in-depth view, but kind of a 1,000-foot overview of why we do our Christmas programs the way we do. What are some of the back and forth arguments for or against, and not really to say that doing it one way is wrong, but really to just kind of go over options that we have. So I've got Matt and Jameson here with me. We're just all going to sit around, kind of do this another kind of a round table like we did a couple episodes ago. And I'm gonna just start us off with why do we spend so much time making sure that these programs are so polished? I mean, because the amount of work that goes into it, the amount of stress on a worship leader and on the worship leader's family, on your teams, your worship team, your tech team especially. Your tech teams get dragged through the dirt on these programs. So really, why do we spend so much time, and is it worth it? What do you think, Jameson?
Well, the answer should be for everyone. The answer is evangelism. Now, the answer for a lot of churches that answer may be buried underneath some other answers. Sometimes it's to justify things, expenditures. But churches with strong music programs, they expect, for the most part, some sort of special presentation at Christmas and at Easter. And then sometimes, Memorial Day, Veterans Day is one that I can think of that is almost every year we will observe Veterans Day. But it is a time when you can break out of your normal mold of worship or have an additional, like a PM service or something, where you would be able to musically present a story, the story of the birth of Christ, the story of the Easter story of death and resurrection. When you present that as a musical, like a cantata or just a special worship service, you're going to have visitors from your church, and outside of special things, Christmas, Easter, maybe Mother's Day, you have the most visitors in your church. And I've always been of the value of best foot forward, so try to put best foot forward every week. But you definitely want your visitors to, especially if it's an invited guest, I want to be proud of my church. I want to be proud to take you to church. I want to see your face when you hear our choir sing, or a special music, or someone who gets to sing by themselves. That's part of it, and that's not pride as like a sinful pride. That's in the essence of evangelism, is making yourself appealing to an unchurched person.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with that. One of the things that my church is going through right now is my pastor. We have a new pastor, and he's an absolutely amazing pastor. Love the guy to death. One of the things that he was a little concerned about was that some of these programs sometimes get in the way of the message. So he doesn't want to necessarily do like the Veterans Day program the same way we've always done it, which was during the service, and it took up the whole service, and not a lot of preaching was done, not a lot of studying from the Word was done. So his idea was, let's keep our morning services about Jesus and about God's Word, and let's do, say, like a luncheon afterwards where we do the veterans program. And I agree with you, absolutely, 100%. You bring somebody to the church, you definitely want them to see the best side of the church.
Right.
Go ahead.
Let's go back to what we would do as worship leaders and worship band or singers, vocalists, team. This past year we had a unique experience where Christmas Day was on Sunday and New Year's Day was on Sunday. And then lots of churches still had a Christmas Eve service. So a lot of decisions had to be made of how much family time are we going to interrupt for our staff and especially our volunteers. And that's not a common. I think it's going to be 11 more years before we have Christmas Day on the 25th again. But you have to go into that season backwards, really, as a planner. You have to start in earlier. I like to start 2 months out and say who can be here on these dates, because I know they interfere with family time. Just about no matter what, it's going to interfere with something. And then from that point on, you can build whatever you're going to build to make out a special service for Christmas or Easter.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about this. You talk about this, you touched on it a little bit. Who gets reached during these Christmas programs? Because you look at a lot of people, the only time that they come to church is because they've got somebody in their family that's doing the children's Christmas program. Well, these are people that need to be reached, and they need to be given the gospel to. So it's an absolutely important thing that we think about who's coming, who's getting reached, and how are we reaching them. If you've got somebody in your family, one of the kids in your family, say a niece or a nephew, that is in a Christmas program, and they're teaching about Jesus through the Christmas program, well, they're evangelizing somebody in their family that normally wouldn't get reached.
That's right. I mean, if you don't have someone in your leadership who's actively thinking every week, what does the visitor see? What does they experience when they pull up in the parking lot? What do they experience when they walk through the door? Is someone telling them where to go, where the bathrooms are, where to take their kids? And then the most important part is, what are they going to receive? What are they going to read on the bulletin? What are they going to read on the screens? All those things should be thought about. Maybe not just, constantly if you want to take a stab on that, Matt.
Yeah, I've got a different perspective on this, and I'm going to preface this by saying very clearly, we're not stepping on anybody's toes. This is not aimed at anybody.
Oh,
this
no,
is just,
no,
we've
no.
all experienced it. But anytime, I've had to do this myself so many times it's not even funny, but I always try to step back and ask myself, how did Jesus' life serve as an example to this problem? Doesn't always work, because when Jesus lived, there wasn't pastors trying to preach about Jesus. I mean, they were saying negative things about him, but they weren't preaching about the gospel at that time. They were talking about God and things. So the perspective I'm going to bring is a little different from what both of you have spoken about. I'm going to take your example, Rob, that you talked about, the Veterans Day program, where pastors have this habit of, I don't want to take away from the message. I think something that gets lost in a lot of modern churches is the understanding that the pastor is there to lead the flock, to train, to bring up disciples, and to send them out into the world. The reaching happens in the world. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen in church, but let's just be biblical about it. The reaching the lost happens on the ground outside of church. Agreed?
Oh, absolutely.
Now, there are going to be people in your church that you want to reach. Absolutely. My problem is, if you don't bring in elements of rest and elements of other things, people get a little bit, what's the word?
Complacent.
You get tired. You get things. So I look at it from a different perspective. Sometimes these things like a Veterans Day programs are a nice break. It's just something different to break up the monotony. Not that pastors are monotonous, but they can be.
Right.
Music can be monotonous.
Absolutely.
And so that's the perspective I'm throwing out there is, if you take the fact that our job is to train the disciples, if you can't train the disciples in those 47 weeks that aren't a holiday or something like that, and take a couple weeks here and there and focus on some other things just to give your congregation rest, then maybe you're putting a little too much emphasis on things. Bring your toes in.
Right. Well, I understand what you're saying, and I think church bodies want that. They want extra things, and they don't want the same thing either. And you're right. I've never thought about it like, well, I have, honestly. I thought about it as a break, as a worship planner. It's like, hey, we got this and this week. I know what we'll do without thinking about it, because it's this and this,
And I'll even give you another example. As a sound tech, primarily, we just recently had our Christmas cantata. A lot of churches did, I'm sure. I love Christmas cantatas. I love choirs. There's some sound things that aren't real ideal about choirs, but from a enjoyment perspective, I love that experience. The problem is, think about your tech team, number one. They don't get the week off. You know what I'm saying? So talking to this point that you're making is, sometimes these special events that you plan are wonderful to the congregation, but some people still have to bend over backwards to make it happen. So even though it's a break to some, it's not to others. So these are just things that you might want to consider.
Yeah, I have always, since I've been a worship, leader, pastor in charge, did what I mentioned to earlier, is I let people know that, it's okay, to take the Sunday off is okay anytime, really. I feel like if you need to take the Sunday off, take it off. and you don't have to tell me why. Just tell me you're not going to be there. So I like to work backwards, and if I needed to, and I have in this instance, like done the sunrise services for the past 5 years by myself, simply because I didn't want to ask persons on my team who already were coming in for 2 services to come 3 hours early to do a 3rd service outside when I could handle it the same way we're kind of handling these episodes where you're just setting up a camera and a mic and singing a song and someone else bringing a word. So and then you'll find, though, your team, they're as excited about Christmas as the church is. So most of the time, they all want to do it. They want to do it anyways.
Well, that's actually really a perfect transition into what was next on the actually list of points that I've got here is what's the toll that's taken on the worship leader and what's the toll that's taken on your tech team or your team members, because you've got to remember your team, most of your team is going to be volunteers. It's going to be people that have full-time jobs that can't really spend as much time practicing as they would like to. So you're putting something that's very highly polished on somebody who's already stretched thin for time. So it is enjoyable for the congregation, but a lot of worship teams have a really, really hard struggle when it comes to this time of year, especially with the Christmas programs, because that seems to be what the most emphasis of the year is put on. It's a struggle, and it's a burden on the team. So like you were talking about in one of the previous episodes, Jameson, you were talking about how your Sunday evening service, you'll invite your team and just say, hey, nobody's got to be here. This is a service I can do by myself, but you're all invited. And I think that was something that you said and this was, I think, probably the first or second episode you were with us, and it stuck in my head. It was just such a profound thought that it stuck in my head over these weeks and months, and I just really wanted to go back to that for just a minute, and the importance of taking care of your team and avoiding burnout, especially when you have such a big demand on your team.
Yeah. Well, let me. I'm a big proponent of taking care of the team because I've been the team and all the assets of it. And you can avoid all of this stuff by having someone who wants to think far enough ahead to lay it out in smaller bites. For example, I'm meeting the 1st of February. Easter this year is in April 9th. So by the 1st of February, I'm gonna have every single thing we're gonna do, and I'm gonna lay it out on a platter, and we're gonna, if you want 2 scoops of this and 2 scoops of this, and everyone's going to know. And then we've got 3 months, to prepare a song a week instead of trying to have extra rehearsals for 2 weeks. And then during Holy Week to try to have extra. It's never a good idea to try to do extra things because people are busy, families are busy, people have multiple jobs. Changing something or doing something on a different day, I promise you it's a bigger deal than it used to be.
And another thing, talking about that, let's talk about some ways that you can relieve the burden on your team. And I think the first and the biggest one, you already hit on it, is planning prior. There's absolutely nothing that can help relieve that burden than prior planning. Also, I think know your team very well. Know what your team's capable of. I'm not that great of a guitar player. I don't understand where all the notes on the frets are. So if my worship leader tells me, hey, I want you to play Miraculum, well, that's going to be a train wreck. I'm far from Lincoln Brewster. So know what your team's capabilities are and make sure that whatever you select for that falls within that range of capabilities. I'm not saying don't push your team, because you want to push your team. You want your team to grow, but don't push them to the point where you're setting them up for failure.
Right. Well, I'm of course, I can only say how I am as a worship leader, and I'm the type of leader that the people who want to be leaders within the group, like a lead guitar player or a lead instrumentalist or especially lead vocalist, I want them to have a seat at the table in choosing material. I think it's important that they have the opportunity, even if they never take it. I'm in just a couple of nights ago in a meeting. Was asking for some soloists, and we kind of started giggling because it's the same people who've not volunteered, for a few weeks, and I was like, I'm never going to stop asking, because I believe every single person deserves an opportunity to do something special if they want to, and then I'm okay with I don't want to make anyone do something that they're not uncomfortable with, but preparation, Rob, is the key to it's key to a better prepared experience, leads to more confidence, leads to less stress, and when you are relaxed, you actually your performance is better because it's relaxed and it's not all up in your neck and short of breath and all the things that come with being tense while you're trying to sing a song or play a part.
Absolutely, yeah. There are also a lot of the times I think the team needs to take some responsibility for self-development. It's not necessarily just the worship leader's job to make sure that the team is prepared, make sure that the team is doing things on their own to further where they are, to become better musicians. Take some music lessons. I mean, I'm always a proponent of self-development, and I think that part of being a worship leader, even more than the music, it's really about leadership. So I think the most important things that some worship leaders could do to make themselves better leaders and make themselves better prepared to take care of their team is to, read a book on personal development, on leadership. Read something by, just some of these authors that have been doing like a lot of what companies use, a lot of things like, John Maxwell, things like that. Well, it doesn't really apply to music, but it really applies to every aspect of your life. So if you're in a leadership position, focus on becoming a better leader, and that's going to help your team as well.
Right. Well, let's talk about like separate congregations and churches. I've served at several churches, so when you get somewhere, you want to find out what their expectations are for special events, holidays. Some churches don't do a 4th of July. Some churches will take that Sunday off even if it hits too close, especially if the church is around a big lake, a recreational lake. Might not say we're not going to have Sunday service if it's on July 4th. So find out what's important, what's going to happen, whether you want to or not. Whether if you're the worship leader and they have an Easter cantata every year, you're probably not going to have the authority to say, well, we're not doing that anymore, without some kind of something to back it up with. And then if you don't know, like Rob said, you never stop learning. Even people who teach, professors of professors. The reason they are that way is because they're continuing to learn, and if you've got to keep yourself humble and realize that you don't have all the answers, and try to learn from the people around you. And leadership, has nothing to do with music. Leadership is leadership, like you were saying, Rob. Musical leadership, though, is different because of the things you were talking about of laying them out so big bites can become little bites. And if you've got, I typically don't lay anything out on someone that would scare them, no matter how early. I wouldn't put a massive guitar part on you if I thought it was going to cause you anxiety, even if you had 4 months to prepare for it. But I would bring it to you and say, hey, you don't have to play this note for note, but I've written this tab out, and it's a simpler way to play it that's still effective. But once again, that backs up to the leadership things. So what other, you want to talk about maybe all the different kinds of special event things you've done? VBS could even be considered a special event for a worship leader or music department, tech department.
Yeah, we don't talk about VBS.
We don't talk about Bruno or VBS.
Well, I tell you, in all honesty, VBS to me is one of the most important events of the year. It's just reaching children for Christ to me is just probably the most important thing that you can do, aside from leading your own family, because you want these opportunities to bring Christ into the lives of people who normally wouldn't experience that. And a lot of times, like with Vacation Bible School especially, a lot of parents just want a babysitter. So they send their kids to every VBS in town. And you know what comes out of that is we get the opportunity to pour into these kids and to teach them about Jesus. I take the week that we do VBS every year, I take that week as a vacation and I spend it working with the kids. And it's something that I've done for the past 3 years, and it's something that I will continue to do until the day I'm in the ground. As long as there is a VBS, I will be there to work with the kids, not because of what it does for me, but because of what it does for the kids and how they can take somebody who they don't even hardly know, who's just pouring into them the love of Christ, and who's working with them and being in a teaching situation where we can teach them. And just watching the kids go through this and watching their little eyes get opened, it's just such a beautiful thing.
Right. And lots of people, you get in conversations with people about different churches. I don't know how many times I've heard, well, I went to VBS there when I was a kid. And the people, for the rest of their lives, they'll remember getting loved on and being shown the love of Jesus, and that's what VBSs are for. Well, that's what church is for, is to,
to get the little cookie.
Yeah, it was. I remember these two brothers come up one time, and they had cookie crumbs all over their mouth, and I was this cookie server. Everyone was getting 2, like, Oreo cookies. And the older one said, he's holding his brother's hand, he said, "We didn't get any cookies." And I was like, "Y'all didn't get any cookies?" My brother didn't get any either. And I was like, "Okay." I handed them each another pair of cookies, and as they walked off, it was cute.
Yeah, these special events, I mean, they really are important. They really also give us a chance to. It gives us a chance to let our team give the Lord our very best without being show-offy, or I think you added that one to the dictionary. But it's a chance to really show what the team can do and give it all to Jesus.
Right. Well, my goal, just personally, in everything I do, is I want to do it great. I don't want to be just good. I strive to be great, not perfect, but great, because I feel like I owe that to whomever is trusting me to do the jobs that I'm being asked to do. I owe it to them to do it as well as I know how to do it. And at this point in my upper middle age, I know a pretty good bit about the things that I do for a living. So I feel like there's really not an excuse for. Are we dead? We dead? Is that what you?
No, the camera's over here.
They're still running. What's
Okay.
up?
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, guys. James just talking away, and I never flipped the
It's
camera.
okay. You can hear me.
I like to do things good, too.
Right. Well, we all do like good things too. What I'm saying, it goes back into just not phone it in.
Like
But
I just did.
The special events is an opportunity for everyone to do that to another degree, and showing that dedication to prepare like a choir cantata. That choirs put in a lot of time for cantatas. Outside of the leadership and the musicians, the choir people, the choir members put in a lot of time, and it's a sense of pride for them. Once again, not the bad kind, but of look what we are doing, look what we have built. And it's like anything, if you work real hard at it, when it's finished, it's a really nice feeling and a really nice exhale, and it's a good exhale for music departments and churches and worship teams to get through this season. And like right now at the 1st of January, it's kind of like exhale before we start Easter planning, and then you just go to these. But these are all elements of worship. Being a worship team leader, being a worship pastor, being a worship member, being the tech person. All of these things are going to happen each year, no matter what size and what type of service, traditional or contemporary. All of these things are going to be pretty much universal.
Yeah. And they're great outreach opportunities too. I mean, my church does a huge 4th of July fireworks show every single year, and I mean, the whole town comes in and watches the fireworks, and everybody, we get hot dogs and stuff for the kids, and it really brings the community together. But while we're doing that, the worship team is up there doing a couple of songs before the fireworks start. So it's just a chance. And I mean, these are songs that, we usually pick songs that are pretty well known, so that even somebody who doesn't go to church every week will probably still know the songs. I mean, everybody knows Waymaker. We did that one last year, and I think we did Lion and the Lamb. It's just songs that aren't necessarily that new, but everybody knows, or at least most people have at least heard the song. So it just it's an outreach opportunity to the community as well. Bring them into the church. And it's outdoors. We set up a big flatbed tractor trailer, semi-trailer flatbed. We put a stage on it, and it's just been one of the things that we've done since I went to that church, and that's been going on for decades. But it's an important thing for the community to get to interact with the church kind of at our home, and it brings everybody together, and somebody's always up there to preach the word of God. It's a great outreach, and all of these programs are really outreach opportunities.
Right. Well, other than the only thing I could think of to wrap up special events, things that are outside of normal worship service, would be like revivals. Some churches have revivals. Conferences, sometimes those are afternoon conferences, sometimes they're weekend conferences, weddings, funerals. all these things can fall under your umbrella of care and volunteer. Sometimes you have to staff these things as well. It's just according where you are and what's involved. But those are all outside of normal worship planning and normal worship services.
Another thing that we used to do, we call it Blast now. It used to be Awana. That was a Wednesday night kids program, and that was every week. This year for Christmas, we had a live nativity scene that was just a drive-through. So you would drive around the little road that goes around my church, and there's different sets of different sets of telling the Christmas story there. For Halloween, we were just talking about judgment houses when we were off camera doing our last episode. That conversation got brought up. And that's another thing that it's definitely an outreach opportunity. It's a special program. It takes a lot of planning and a lot of effort. But these are all ways that we can reach the community and we can get the word of God out there.
That's right.
Yeah, and I'll make one last point specifically about the whole special events and how they can really, you can overthink them, you can underthink them, and how they can actually come back to surprise you, to bite you. Our last service, obviously, like everybody's, was on Christmas Day. I will be the first to admit I was wrong, because I swore up and down, why are we having a service on Christmas Day? Because I want to be with my family. I want to wake up. I want to do Christmas morning. Nobody's going to be here. Everybody's going to be out of town. They're going to be with their family. We had one of the biggest Christmas services we've ever had. I mean, it was hundreds of people, and I was like, okay, I got that one wrong.
Right.
But to have that service, you had to have people there early, late, set up, breakdown. So there's always a give and a take. Just always think about that when you're thinking about these special events. Is having it is a wonderful thing, but it comes at a cost. Everything comes at a cost.
Yeah, a lot of churches, like we talked about this earlier, it was a unique, it's going to be 11 more years before we have Sunday on the December 25th. But even some large churches that I know, they had very stripped down churches, no child care, no kind of classes.
Yeah.
Because all those are staffed by volunteers, even at the biggest churches you can think of. Those are all volunteer based. So most churches try to take most of the volunteers out of the equation. But we also had a full, the same amount of people as we always have. And it was great. I enjoyed it myself.
Well, this has been a fun episode. Rob, you got anything else you want to?
Yeah, that's. I really just wanted to kind of circle back around to what you were just saying. Is whenever you're thinking about doing something like this, whenever you're thinking about putting on some kind of a big, and it doesn't even have to be something like a special service. It could be just a worship night. Jameson and I, when we really got to know each other, it was a deal where his music school had put together a program with the youth that he was teaching lessons to. He created what he calls the Praise Academy and brought them to my church and several other churches in the area. And they just took an evening service, and what they did was they came and they really showcased their worship, and it was a beautiful thing, and it was so exciting. And I know a lot of people were touched by that, and a lot of people were reached by that. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a big holiday event. You can just do a worship night. During the middle of the week, it doesn't matter. Do a worship night. It's still an event. It's still something special, but it brings people together and it gives them a chance to maybe do some songs that they wouldn't consider doing on a Sunday morning, because, some churches, every song has to be a prayer. Some churches don't have the higher energy songs, so a worship night allows you to do that kind of stuff. So there's other things that we could really think. We could do a whole episode on worship night sometime. I'd love to do that one. But always, before you set up any event, make sure you count the cost. Make sure that you're going to be able to complete it. Make sure that your team is willing to give above and beyond what they normally do in order to make it effective. Because we don't want to do anything halfway. We want to do it effectively. We want to do it with excellence.
And make sure you're not asking too much of your teams, because there are a lot of people that will bend over backwards to make something happen. That doesn't mean they should. So as a worship leader especially, always make sure that you're not asking more than you should. Generally speaking, if it's being done for God, people will bend over backwards, and that's fair. But if you're doing it just because you want to do something neat and something new and something unique, think. That would be my only word of caution, is think. who has to be there early? Who has to be there late? How much more effort does this take to do it? How much time am I taking away from people, from their families, to pull this off? They're going to do it. But that don't mean they're going to be happy about it sometimes. So that's all I have. So
I don't really have anything else either. So,
well, I'll wrap it up. Since I wasn't in the other episode we did, I appreciate the guys joining me on this. We're going to probably attempt to do more of these roundtable discussions. We kind of, I generally feel like we all feel that these are valuable. So if you got any suggestions on new ones, let us know. But we're going to visit this a little deeper. Thanks for taking the time to join us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
God bless y'all.